The United States Air Force, USAF, and the Russian Air Force, VVS, are two of the most powerful in the world. Their global ranking alone automatically positions them as rivals, but the truth is that these two forces couldn't be more apart and more different. In fact, the only thing the USAF and the VVS truly share is the sky itself. Now, many might assume the biggest difference lies in size and resources, and sure, the US dwarfs Russia in both. The USAF's budget is staggering, and its fleet is unmatched, but that's not the real story. The true difference between these forces is far deeper. It defines how they fight, prepare, and even think, and this is the difference that will truly blow your mind. Let's start with a bit of history to understand where these forces come from. The older of the two, the Russian Air Force, traces its roots back to 1912, when it was established as the Imperial Russian Air Service. Following the Russian Revolution and the rise of the Soviet Union, the Air Service evolved into the Soviet Air Forces. This was also when this Air Force started focusing on massive numbers and overwhelming force. After the Soviet Union dissolved, Russia restructured its air capabilities, maintaining a focus on power projection and territorial defense. Today, this force is officially known as the Vojenno-Vozduzhny Sily Rossi, which is where the VVS acronym comes from. In 2015, it became part of the Russian Aerospace Forces, a move that integrated the Air Force with the space and missile defense units. The US Air Force, on the other hand, was officially born in 1947, though its origins date back to 1907 when it was first formed as part of the Army Signal Corps. After World War II, the US recognized the need for an independent air force to match the global importance of aviation. Today, the USAF focuses on air supremacy, global intelligence, rapid mobility, and global strikes, ensuring the US military dominates anywhere in the world. With a highly organized structure under the Department of the Air Force, it operates with cutting-edge technology and strategic doctrine. The USAF also operates the largest and most advanced fleet in the world, supported by the biggest military budget in the world. Though this isn't what primarily makes it more powerful than the Russian Air Force, we can't deny that size and resources play a huge role. That's why this is the first difference between these two air forces that we'll look into. Now, for this comparison, we'll use the 2024 numbers. However, as you'll soon see, the real difference isn't about numbers. It isn't even about who has more jets. It's about the type of jets and how they're used. Let's start with the total active inventory for both countries. According to the World Directory of Modern Military Aircraft, the US Air Force operated a total of 5,189 aircraft. As for the Russian Air Force, the total number is 3,652. These numbers might vary from source to source, but they're generally consistent across most reports. Both numbers cover a wide range of mission types, from attack to logistics, special operations, and general support. It's only when you start looking into these aircraft types in more detail that the true differences begin to emerge. The difference in the budget of these forces also becomes abundantly clear. The US Air Force budget for the 2024 fiscal year was about $185 billion. This figure includes the operation and maintenance budget, the military personnel budget, and the research, development, test, and evaluation budget. This figure is also larger than Russia's total military budget for 2024, which was about $103 billion. That's right, the USAF alone operates with a budget nearly double that of Russia's entire military. Let's see how this discrepancy is reflected in their respective fleets and operational capabilities. A closer look at individual aircraft types should be very telling. First up, fighter jets. The US Air Force has a significant edge in this category, with a larger fleet of fighters and more advanced technology. In 2024, the US boasted 1,442 fighter aircraft, which included some of the most advanced and costly jets in the world. The most notable is the F-35 Lightning II, a fifth-generation multi-role fighter that costs around $109 million per unit. First flown in 2006, this jet is capable of conducting air-to-air and air-to-ground combat with stealth capabilities that make it almost invisible to enemy radar. Russia, in comparison, operated 1,188 fighter aircraft in 2024. However, this number only included 22 operational Sukhoi Su-57s, which is Russia's response to the F-35. The Su-57 is the first aircraft in Russian military service developed with stealth technology, which reveals another important difference between the USAF and the VVS. Russia has yet to truly master the art of stealth. While the Su-57 was designed to compete with the American F-35, experts argue that the aircraft's stealth capabilities are still far from meeting the standards of the US models. The Su-57's radar cross-section, which determines how detectable an aircraft is by radar, remains a major weak point. So weak that many analysts believe that the Su-57 may not even be a true stealth fighter. So as it turns out, achieving true stealth takes more than simply putting a stealth label on the aircraft. And remember, stealth technology has single-handedly revolutionized air combat. The ability to operate nearly undetected by radar is a game-changer. allowing jets to infiltrate enemy defenses with relative ease. Russia's inability to take full advantage of this revolutionary technology tells us one thing: the country lacks the infrastructure and resources to truly compete on the same level. This trend of Russia developing aircraft to match US capabilities but failing miserably isn't limited to stealth alone. Most of Russia's fighters are at least one step behind those of the Americans. Besides the F-35, the USAF's fleet of fighters includes the F-22 Raptor, F-16 Fighting Falcon, and the F-15 Eagle, all of which have modern air superiority and strike capabilities. But this fleet isn't only designed for air-to-air combat. It's designed for multi-domain operations that include intelligence gathering. The US also has the edge when it comes to integrated systems, with its fighters working seamlessly alongside other platforms like bombers and surveillance aircraft. Now, don't get us wrong, Russia also has some very capable fighters. Take the Su-27 and Su-35 as an example. These are powerful aircraft known for their agility, speed, and strong air-to-air combat capabilities. These characteristics allow them to excel in traditional combat scenarios. However, they lack the adaptability and range of modern US air platforms. So while the Russian fighters might give their American counterparts a run for their money in ultra-specific scenarios, they can't compete in the broader, more dynamic operational environments in which the USAF thrives. Similar discrepancies can be seen in the bomber fleets of both countries. The US and Russia both maintain formidable bomber fleets, but the differences in the design philosophy and capabilities of their aircraft are striking. While the US has a modern, highly specialized bomber fleet with cutting-edge technologies, Russia's fleet is a mix of old, upgraded models that prioritize quantity over the technological sophistication seen in the US bombers. In 2024, the US operated 152 bombers, compared to Russia's 125. That's not a massive difference in numbers alone. However, the US fleet includes advanced aircraft like the B-52H Stratofortress, the B-1B Lancer, and the B-2 Spirit. The B-52, first introduced in the 1950s, is still in service. It will also probably remain active for decades to come, illustrating its adaptability and the effectiveness of its design. The B-1B Lancer, entering service in the 1980s, is a versatile aircraft capable of conventional missions, previously even nuclear ones, but it was converted into a conventional-only role under the START treaty with Russia, while the B-2 Spirit, which became operational in the 1990s, offers stealth and long-range precision strike capabilities. The upcoming B-21 Raider, set to replace many of the B-2 and B-1 bombers, promises to usher in a new era of advanced, stealthy, and high-performance bombers. Russia, on the other hand, still relies on older bombers like the Tupolev Tu-95, Tu-160, and Tu-22M. While these bombers have been upgraded over the years, their origins date back decades. The Tu-95, introduced in 1956, is a turboprop strategic bomber that's been modernized over the years. However, its age and design limitations make it less capable compared to its American counterparts. The Tu-160, known as the White Swan, is a supersonic bomber that entered service in 1987 and is considered one of Russia's most powerful bombers. However, despite its impressive capabilities, the Tu-160 still can't come close to the B-2, which is designed specifically for stealth and deep penetration missions. The Tu-22M3, meanwhile, is a supersonic bomber used primarily for tactical strikes. Still, its operational range of roughly 4,350 miles and payload capacity of almost 53,000 pounds aren't on par with that of American bombers. The cost difference between the Russian and US bombers also paints quite a vivid picture. If we take the cost of the modernized Tu-160M nuclear bombers into account, there's still a staggering difference. Estimates for the former's price tag are anywhere between $163 million and $300 million per unit. Meanwhile, a single B-2 costs well over $2 billion. This difference alone is enough to illustrate the advanced technology, stealth capabilities, and long-term investment involved in American bomber programs. The same trends observed in fighter jets and bombers apply across all other notable categories in the fleets of both nations. The conclusion is always the same: the USAF has more of them, and they're way better. So rather than diving into the intricate details of each type and repeating the same conclusion over and over again, let's take a quick overview of how these categories stack up across the US Air Force and the Russian Air Force. In the Close Air Support (CAS) role, which focuses on providing precision strikes to support ground operations, the US holds a notable advantage with 314 aircraft compared to Russia's 194. The US fleet includes the legendary A-10C Thunderbolt II, a beast in close combat. The US also employs specialized aircraft like the AC-130 gunship to provide firepower and support on the battlefield, and Russia just 194 Su-25 aircraft. While the Su-25 is effective in its role, it's not an equivalent to the AC-130. When it comes to transport aircraft, the gap widens even further. The US has 684 transports compared to Russia's 387. But as always, it's not just about the numbers. The US fleet gives the word transport a whole new meaning. It's truly designed for global reach, with aircraft like the C-17 Globemaster III, C-130 Hercules, and the massive C-5 Galaxy. These birds can carry anything from troops to heavy machinery across vast distances. In contrast, Russia's transport fleet is full of older models, like the Il-76, which severely limits its operational flexibility. In other words, there's no keeping up for Russia on the global stage. Then there are tankers. The US Air Force operates 522 tanker aircraft, while Russia only has 19. That's not just a small difference, it's a game changer. Again, it all comes back to projecting power across the globe. With such an impressive fleet of KC-135 and KC-46 tankers, the US can extend the reach of its entire air force, and Russia simply can't compete. What about special mission aircraft? Well, the US holds a commanding lead here as well, with 237 aircraft in various roles like reconnaissance, electronic warfare, and airborne command posts. Russia, with only 75, is outclassed in every category: the number, the variety, the capability. Plus, the US platforms all work together to provide global intelligence and strike capabilities. In Russia, the strategy is more like every aircraft for itself. In terms of training aircraft, the US has 1,531, while Russia operates 485. This discrepancy points to another important difference between the USAF and the VVS. The US has significantly more Air Force personnel. The 2024 estimates put the number at almost 320,000 active duty soldiers, while their Russian counterparts fail to even reach 200,000. Because of the sheer number of active duty personnel, the US needs more training platforms that can get the job done. And it's got it from basic trainers like the T-6 Texan II to advanced aircraft like the T-38 Talon. But the US doesn't just have better training platforms for Air Force personnel. It has better training, period. Russia is more concerned about sending political messages than actually preparing for the realities of modern warfare. That's why military events like Zapad, Vostok, Sentir, and Kavkaz are only designed to be massive in scale and impressive on paper. And while the Kremlin is busy throwing military parades and strategic displays of power, its pilots only log around 100 to 120 flying hours a year. Even worse, the Russian fighter pilots fall on the lower end of that range. For comparison, US Air Force pilots typically average around 147 hours annually on weapons aircraft, though they aim for at least 180 hours to meet NATO standards, with some pilots historically logging up to 240 hours in more optimal conditions, plus additional time in high-fidelity simulators. And those extra hours aren't just numbers on paper. They mean more practice, better reflexes, and deeper familiarity with advanced tactics. They allow US pilots to train for multi-role missions and complex scenarios that their Russian counterparts can only dream of executing in real-world combat. It's one thing to field a capable machine, it's entirely another thing to deploy it successfully in contested airspace. That's why it doesn't matter how many modernized aircraft models Russia brings to its fleet. As long as its pilots have inconsistent and insufficient training, these machines won't be able to reach their full potential. The same goes for combat experience. The US Air Force has spent over a century refining its craft in some of the world's most challenging conflicts, from World War I to the Cold War, from Vietnam to the Gulf War, and through the prolonged campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan. US airmen have faced nearly every imaginable scenario. World War II was when the USAF, or its predecessor, to be precise, truly became the most powerful air force in the world, operating as many as 2.4 million personnel and 80,000 aircraft. And these engagements aren't just one-off deployments, they represent years of sustained operations, often in coalition with allied forces. These missions have demonstrated the USAF's ability to adapt to evolving threats, coordinate with multinational partners, and execute missions under intense pressure. For the Russian Air Force, the story is different. Most of its operational experience is limited to regional conflicts like its intervention in Syria and limited support in Libya. While these missions allowed Russia to showcase some of its air capabilities, they pale in comparison to the breadth and intensity of the US operations. Essentially, the VVS operates mainly within its sphere of influence, focusing on nearby territories and former Soviet states. And that's precisely where the main difference between the US Air Force and the Russian Air Force lies. The types and number of aircraft used, the training, the deployments, they all tell the same story. The US sees air power as a tool for global dominance, extending its reach to every corner of the world. The USAF isn't designed just to protect American soil, it's built to project power across continents. This ambition is rooted in the doctrine of air superiority, where control of the skies is essential for any military success. The goal isn't to win the battle, it's to shape the strategic environment long before the conflict even begins. Russia, in stark contrast, is only looking inward. The country's doctrine is primarily about regional defense, centered on protecting its borders and critical areas of influence. The VVS functions as a shield, not a sword. Unlike the USAF's quest to dominate airspace far from home, Russia's focus is to deny enemies access to its territory. As such, it leans heavily on anti-access area denial (A2AD) strategies, weaving a web of air defenses that make intrusion costly and dangerous. Take the S-400 and S-500 systems as an example. These are the cornerstone technologies in Russia's approach. These systems aren't designed for sweeping offensives, but for building an impenetrable fortress. The S-500 alone is supposedly capable of defending against up to 10 incoming ballistic hypersonic missiles at altitudes as high as 120 miles. The Russian military doctrine supports this defensive mindset. Aircraft and weapon systems in the VVS are structured to integrate tightly with ground forces, serving as airborne artillery rather than independent operators. Even Russia's strategic bombers play a secondary role, mostly reinforcing nuclear deterrence rather than conducting far-reaching air campaigns. In contrast, the USAF thrives on flexibility and power projection, as evidenced in its fleet. The US doctrine is built around agile operations with a mix of fighters, bombers, and support aircraft that work in concert to dismantle enemy defenses and impose dominance. This makes the F-22s and F-35s more than cutting-edge jets. They're symbols of a strategy that prioritizes controlling the air, no matter the theater of war. Whether it's over the Middle East, the Pacific, or Eastern Europe, the USAF operates with the same intent, creating an airspace where its forces can maneuver freely and dictate terms. Training also reflects these goals. American pilots undergo rigorous exercises designed to simulate global operations, often in complex environments with joint multinational forces. Red flag exercises, for instance, mimic high-stakes scenarios where coordination between air, land, and naval units is key. The Russian large-scale exercises, which we've already mentioned, are largely focused on defending the country's borders or managing regional conflicts. This emphasis is prominently displayed in Ukraine. When Russia launched its invasion in 2022, its Air Force initially struck hard, targeting airfields and air defenses. It seemed like a coordinated counter-air campaign. However, this campaign wasn't sustained. The VVS failed to establish air superiority despite facing an opponent with virtually no modern air force. In no time, Russian fighters and bombers fell back into supporting roles for ground forces, unable to fully suppress Ukrainian air defenses. The USAF would never have approached this campaign in the same way. Its doctrine would demand a multi-phase air assault, integrating suppression of enemy defenses, strategic bombing, and ISR, which stands for intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Precision-guided munitions, stealth aircraft, and electronic warfare would be employed to blind, confuse, and overwhelm the adversary. In other words, control of the airspace will be established first. Then we can talk about ground operations. Ukraine also shows the cost of Russia's faulty doctrine for the whole world to see. Russia's heavy losses in Ukraine highlight the rigid, outdated nature of its operational planning. The country's fighters and helicopters are used as nothing more than blunt tools, which make them vulnerable to modern threats like manpads and drones. That's probably why Russia has lost around 369 airplanes and 329 helicopters in Ukraine in less than 3 years. Remaining stuck in the Soviet era and tied to its concepts, the VVS simply lacks the autonomy to innovate and lead campaigns independently. A similar trend can be seen in the organization of the Russian Air Force. The VVS is entirely subordinated to its army-centric military. As such, it struggles with flexibility in battle. In contrast, the USAF operates with far more autonomy, allowing it to take the initiative and adjust tactics on the fly. The US Air Force doesn't just follow the army, it drives the narrative of the battle. As for the Russian Air Force, it's nothing more than a supporting character, usually unable to make any independent decisions and craft its own campaigns. That's why Russian airstrikes often lack the cohesion needed for decisive outcomes. But doctrine is about more than just how forces are used, it's also about what they aim to achieve. For the USAF, air power is a strategic tool that shapes global geopolitics. It's a means to deter adversaries, reassure allies, and enforce international norms. The presence of American bombers or fighters in contested regions sends a clear message: the US is ready to act. Russia again focuses on deterrence closer to home. Its air power reinforces its image as a regional player, capable of defending its heartland and intimidating neighbors. The emphasis on nuclear-capable bombers and integrated air defenses only serves to support this goal. These elements signal strength without necessarily projecting it far beyond the Russian borders. In short, both the US and Russia rely on their air forces immensely. However, they do it in profoundly different ways and with different end goals. Once you understand the key difference between the USAF and the VVS, all other discrepancies start to make a lot more sense. You understand why the Russian Air Force lags in terms of technological advancements, operational efficiency, and overall combat readiness, why only a fraction of its entire fleet is flight-worthy at all times, and why this branch consistently experiences delay, underperformance, poor maintenance practices, and a lack of routine checks. Russia simply doesn't treat the VVS as an independent branch with its own strategic objectives. It's just there to support the army and remain close to home. Nothing more, nothing less. This mindset has prevented the VVS from developing a coherent air combat doctrine that can adapt to the modern battlefield. It's also essentially shackled the Russian pilots with rigid control structures from the ground. At the same time, the USAF has built its capabilities around air superiority, precision strikes, and global reach, prioritizing technological advancements like stealth, advanced radar systems, and cutting-edge weaponry. That's why its highly trained pilots can outmaneuver and outgun their Russian counterparts in every scenario. Now let us ask you a question. Has the huge difference between the US and the Russian Air Forces surprised you? Or have you always known there's more to the story than just numbers and hardware? Share your answers in the comments section below. Now go and check out how are US soldiers different from Russian soldiers, or click this other video instead.